Carol was formerly a social worker. She's recently been released from a psychiatric unit. And why has that occurred? Because Carol has been trying to tell the truth about what's going on in British society. So today she's going to be telling us what has really been happening to her, and also covering in detail some of the extraordinary things that are going on under the surface through the British public sector, through the police, through child protection. And these are matters which she feels, and we certainly feel, that the British public needs to be aware of. Carol, thank you very much for joining us. Now, of course, we've met in audio, as it were, because you did an excellent presentation with Andy Peacher on Freedom Talk Radio a couple of nights ago, and I know that there's been a really tremendous response to that. So where do we start? Your story really goes back to about 2000.
Yes, yes, it
and
does.
You were working as a senior social worker with Lancashire County Council. And you started to see things happening around child protection,
Yes,
and
yes.
in particular the records of children.
Yes.
What did you see?
Well, within 6 weeks of taking up the post in January 2000, I could see records that were appearing that somehow seemed to come from thin air. And given that they were my clients, I was the assigned caseworker. I puzzled over where these records had come from without my knowledge. Prior to January 2000 and taking up that post, I had worked for Preston Social Services in the past. Absolutely no complaints, everybody extremely professional, clients got a good service, social workers were happy. But that was approximately 1989. Since then, there had been massive changes. Lancashire was on special measures, and they were on special measures for years. And they only managed a 1-star rating after the special measures ceased, the status ceased. Now, in September 2000, I was the assigned social worker on a highly contentious case of baby LF. The mother of baby LF was a vulnerable young woman. She'd been brought up in care. She had no real support at all. And one of the saddest things was she said to me that I was the only friend she had. I had to point out to her I wasn't her friend. I was her social worker, and as such, I would have to do what I had to do, if necessary, which may not be what a friend would want to do. The child was lovely. The mother obviously cared for her. There had been some conflict within the family, which was all resolved. There were many agencies involved to resolve any issues that may have led to concerns. And in September 2000, I went to Preston Magistrates Court with a senior legal rep from Lancashire County Council, Jane Gladstone. And Jane's heart wasn't in trying to get this baby from this mother at all. There was no reason to take this child from this mother. And we went to court, and they lost their attempt to get an order to say the child had to be put into care or removed for any reason, or anything of a detriment to the family.
Right, and the they is Lancashire Children's Services.
Yes, yes. So I was pleased with the result, obviously. The young mother was pleased with the result. Jane Gladstone, I felt, was pleased with the result. I never saw her again. Shortly after that, a legal rep came to see me in the office, Judy Deering. Now, Judy Deering worked in Lancashire Legal Department, but oddly, I couldn't find her name as a registered solicitor in the law book of the time. Since then, of course, with everything on the internet, those law books are just null and void and they're not held anywhere. Judy Deering was very upset about Jane Gladstone's handling of the case and said to me, well, we want an order. Katrina wants an order. Now, the Katrina she referred to had been a manager in our office, Katrina Pennington, who I will not discredit in any way because Katrina sadly died. She is not here to defend herself, so we're not going to discuss Katrina. But she said, Katrina wants an order. And I said, Katrina can't have an order. She doesn't even work for us. It's nothing to do with Katrina. Judy Deering asked me to alter the information on the child's file, as her exact words were, more in favour of the local authority. I flatly refused to do it. She was extremely annoyed. I asked for some management support. I said, we cannot start altering children's files. I said, this is perjury in a court of law if she proceeds to the higher court. Judy Deering dismissed the magistrates. Her exact words were, we're not listening to them, they're just a bunch of greengrocers. So any magistrate listening will be highly delighted to know that that is what they thought of. They tried to pursue the case through the Blackburn Family Division High Court. And it went on and it went on and it went on. The young mother, imagine, she has no support, she had no friends, no family. What the stress was putting her through. To ensure that there was no sort of little games behind our back where they pulled rabbits out of the hat to say, well, the partner's this and the partner's that. We had the probation service involved with the partner, who was the father of the child. We had the NSPCC do a formal assessment of the father as whether he was suitable to be in the house with the child and the mother. Yeah. We went through every single channel we could, had it all formally presented, and a guardian ad litem was appointed for the baby. The guardian ad litem was Gwyn Pullum, and he was no pushover. He was known to be very strict, not particularly fond of social services, and he came to see the files. He was highly delighted at my recordings, and he went to court to represent the baby. The mother was in court. I went to court represented by somebody from the legal department who I had never actually spoken to at all. And this was just a preliminary hearing in the Blackburn Family Division High Court, which was absolutely appalling because the magistrates had already dismissed the case. Lancashire County Council had no claim on that baby.
Right. So just moving on a little bit here. Yes. So essentially records are altered to achieve what aim? The child's taken away?
Yes. Now then, right. Because of what else was going on at the time, I was under the impression that that child was what I called an ordered baby. That, to me, meant that she's a vulnerable young woman. We can take her child off her because we know somebody who is probably more suitable, a real couple who want a baby and they can't have one, so we'll provide them with one.
Right.
That is what I was certain was going on.
And you're mentioning this now. My mind is saying to me, and we over the last 3 years have been hearing similar stories from parents who are saying that their children were taken away under false pretenses, and the implication is that those children are being taken to order, as you say.
Undoubtedly, undoubtedly.
So was that, excuse me, was that the only case that you dealt with? You had 39, I think it was, serious cases to deal with. Was that the only case where you suspected this was happening, or were there just other cases?
Well, in relation to taking the baby, the baby LF case was becoming quite widely known throughout other offices within Lancashire, and review chairs of case conferences were expressing very concern about what Lancashire were doing to this young woman and this baby. I can't say about other children. I was nothing to do with adoption. My work was crisis child protection.
Right.
What I do know as a fact is that children's files were being altered. Certain children involved, highly contentious cases, very difficult cases, children, two small boys, children SP and SP, a slightly older boy, MB, a highly contentious matter of serious child sex abuse in the case of children BM and KM, and a slightly older boy, again about 15, child KF. Now, they were what I could prove was altered in the data, the recordings, crucial documents missing from the files, and I actually reported that formally to what was the Social Services Inspectorate, the Director of Education, the Director, of Social Services at the time, who was Pauline Oliver. I took it to Chris Cheetham, who was the Cabinet Minister on the Social Services Committee. I took it everywhere I could. And nobody responded.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Right. So we've got one of the most critical subjects, which is child protection.
Yes.
You are pointing out serious wrongdoing, and then your experience of dealing with the authorities who should be protecting the system and protecting the children, as they don't want to know.
No, I mean, the issue was, it's not just the altering of the file, it is the altering of the file to show the detriments suffered by the children, by the authorities.
Yes.
So it's not just the altering of the file, well, we don't like that, so we'll remove it. I'm talking about removing crucial documents that prove serious detriments suffered by the families from the authorities, not from the families, from the authorities.
Right. And
so
then,
that's slightly different.
And then that doctored material, those lies are taken into court and used, which is perjury.
Yes, they are. Yes.
So you started to create waves, that's the description.
Yes.
You started to, would you call yourself a whistleblower at that stage? Or
Not
just
at that stage, no, because I didn't stay long. At the time, I wasn't planning to stay and blow the whistle. I resigned on the spot. I flatly refused to alter any file. I flatly refused to offer perjury in court. LCC went mob-handed to court when the next hearing had been arranged, and the Guardian actually stood up, apparently, this is what was related to me later, and had to tell the judge. Carol Woods said none of this. He said, I have seen her files. This is not recorded. The judge rapped the knuckles of Lancashire County Council and said, you should have listened to Carol Woods. I had been removed from the case. The young mother wasn't allowed to speak to me at all, under any circumstances, and the only reason I was still around at the time, after resigning on the spot, was because I was working my 2 months' notice, which I was obliged to do at my level.